Proxy principle.
Hello again, friends, and welcome to the Proxy Principle. I'm your host, Candi Rans. Notice anything different? Look at what we manifested together. A microphone. Yep, my buddy Skip Johnson found out I was doing a podcast, and he said, I've got a mic for you if you want to use it. See? Build it, and they will come. No more hairbrush. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, Skip Johnson. And I can't thank Skip Johnson and go without thanking my mister. It doesn't hurt to be in a relationship with a guy who does lighting for TV and movies for a living. So yes, thank you, Michael Albala, for helping me troubleshoot in the lighting arena. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to be the person that listens to a podcast while I'm doing things around the house or I'm out driving somewhere. And I tend to listen to pretty heavy topics. We'll get into some of those at some point. But today, I'm going to keep it on a lighter side. Give you a little fluff. So if you're looking for some background noise, this is your episode. Today, we're going to talk about hair. To some of you, hair may not be that big of a deal. But to others, it's their calling card. Kind of like the story of Samson. The source of his strength was his hair. The amount of money spent annually on hair products alone, God, I wish I had invested in it years ago. Why? Hair drives self-confidence. Unless you have a really great head, and then bald is beautiful. Not everybody can carry that look. Which must be the reason that globally, the wig and hair extension industry is over $6 billion a year. And it's projected to double by the year 2030. That's a lot of confidence being sold out there. And speaking of hair, if you're watching, my locks may look a little different than they did from the last episode. You could probably tell that I was due for a bit of a hair zhuzh. I tend to get bored, so I looked for a little inspiration on Pinterest and noticed that a style that I had close to 20 years ago is making a comeback. The chunky highlights and lowlights. This time I went with more lowlights. But yes, I used to wear a few colors that were reminiscent of Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's. And that hair initiated an abundance of phone calls from me, from friends all over the country. My grandma, with her southern drawl, referred to my hair as strapped. And if you don't understand that dialect, she meant that it looked striped. It was 2002, and I guess there was a new singing competition that had hit televisions all over the U.S. I had not seen it and didn't really know much about it, if I'm being honest. But people were calling to tell me about this girl who looked like me. She was a singer, and I had not met anyone who had hair like mine. But I'll be darned. We basically had the same hair. Her name was Kelly Clarkson, and the show was American Idol. I was surprised I hadn't heard of it being a singer and all, but it was probably because I was working 55 hours a week just to make ends meet. I had lived in LA for a little over a year at this point, and it can take a little while just to get adjusted here. We didn't have GPS 20-something years ago. We had MapQuest, or we had to use what was called a Thomas Guide. Does anybody still use either one of those here in LA? Anyway, I only had one friend when I moved out here. So trying to find a roommate to live with that was trustworthy, finding a job that would pay the bills, which I ended up having two because it's expensive to live in Los Angeles, making friends, contacts, etc. All of it was a big adjustment. So I really didn't have a lot of time to watch television because I was trying to get onto television. I moved out here on my first record deal, but it fell through. It sure would have been nice to know about Idol, but I did find out that I was too old to even submit for the audition anyway. Yeah, that age thing can really bite you in the butt sometimes. Everybody was just like, just lie. Nobody tells their real age. But they already had a Kelly, and I already had a record deal, or so I thought. The label was out of Nashville, and they were moving headquarters to this side of the country. The label was called Movie Music, and I was the first artist to be signed. They didn't exactly give me an advance, which is why I had to look for work when I moved out here. I had 2 restaurant gigs, one at a brewery in Burbank called Gordon Biersch, and the other at LA's oldest Italian restaurant, Michelli's. You had to audition to work there because all of the servers were singers. And at the time, one of your audition pieces had to be an Italian aria. Well, I got the gig. But working 2 restaurant jobs 55 hours a week left little time for creativity. And although I made a lot of contacts at these 2 restaurants, I was tired. I wasn't even really going out that much. And for a 30-something, tired is not what you want to project. Someone told me about this place called Central Casting. It's the leading background actor casting company in the United States. What's a background actor, you ask? You know when you're watching a TV show or a movie and there are extra people walking around or eating or doing some kind of activity behind the main characters of what you're watching? They might even be talking, but you don't hear them. They basically bring the atmosphere to that particular scene. Because it'd be really weird if the only people you saw on your screen throughout the whole movie were the main characters. Unless you're watching some apocalyptic piece like 10 Cloverfield Lane. So yeah, it sounded interesting and I thought, this might be my way onto television. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, or the places it would lead me. One of my assets that got me a lot of work was my hair, on the big screen and small. And I'm going to share a few highlights with you today, no pun intended. So here we go. I got cast as a regular extra on the most popular television show at the time. Maybe you've heard of it. It was their 8th season, and each cast member was making $1 million an episode. The show was called Friends, and although it might have started out with some so-so reviews, by its 8th season, that was the one I was on. It was huge, turning 6 mostly unknown actors into household names and making everyone suddenly care way too much about their hair. In my opinion, you can never care too much about your hair. I mainly worked in the central perk scenes. Between takes, I might be walking backstage and I'd occasionally hear someone whisper or yell, "Jen! Jen!" No one else would be around, so I would turn, and it was usually a crew member whispering that yell, and they would say, "Oh, you're not Jen." And I'd say, "No, but thanks." And even though she's a bit more petite than I am, Jennifer Aniston and I wore our hair in a very similar fashion. And if someone was mistaking me for the superstar whose hairstyle became a character of their own, I was okay with that. But there was this one episode, the 18th episode, as a matter of fact, later in the season, entitled "The One from Massapequa," where my hair made an impact. This is the one when Monica volunteers to take over Ross's role as the official toast giver at their parents' 35th wedding anniversary, and she quickly regrets it. It's also the one where we meet Phoebe's new boyfriend, Parker, played by Alec Baldwin, and he annoys everyone at the party with his relentless, cheerful attitude. No one can stand this guy's optimism. Well, I think an average episode of Friends might take 5 hours to shoot. But this was a party scene, and we also had to come in on the weekend after the live taping to get some extra shots. I styled my hair a bit differently than I usually do with that straight iron look that everyone was wearing, because I knew we would be there multiple days, and it would be easier for continuity's sake if I let it all go natural. You know, kind of scrunch it up a little bit and tease it with some hairspray. I know it sounds a little 80s, which was my favorite time period, but I can't help myself sometimes. I also can't believe I used to get perms in high school in order to achieve this look, because little did I know, I have naturally curly hair, and it wasn't necessary. But yes, this is how I happened to wear it on this episode. I noticed that Jennifer Aniston was on the other side of set, trying to look nonchalant, hanging out with her hairdresser, Chris McMillan. I had been on set enough to notice that the actors didn't really come out that often unless they were getting ready to shoot. But there she was with Chris, and she was kind of pointing in my direction while speaking to him, and I looked right at her. Now, if you ever watched the show, you know that thing she does when she's been caught doing something and she's kind of like, she does this like erratic hair thing and then walks in the other direction? Well, she did that when I looked at them. She wasn't in character and we weren't shooting. And I thought, oh, that's a little odd. So I called my mom on the way home from shooting that episode and I told her the story. My instinct was that they were talking about my hair, and I said to my mom, I wonder if she's going to try styling her hair like mine for the next episode. I guess we'd just have to wait and see. Now, a lot of times a series will shoot scenes from multiple episodes in one day, and most of the time we shoot episodes way ahead or even out of order of the actual air date. Well, this was the case in this episode 18, the one from Massapequa. It wouldn't be airing until later in the season. But the next episode that aired, which was episode 9, shot out of order, was called The One with the Rumor. It was when Monica runs into an old high school buddy and invites him to Thanksgiving dinner with the gang, totally unaware that he and Rachel have a history, and not the kind that you post about on Facebook. You might remember this one because the old buddy, Will, who hated Rachel, he was portrayed by none other than Brad Pitt. But you'll notice something a little different about Rachel. She was wearing her hair a tad bit different. And you'll have to go back and forth between episodes 9 and 18 to do the comparison. And yes, hers looked a bit better than mine. I mean, she had Chris McMillan as a stylist. And all I had was a teasing comb and some Frizzy's hairspray. But my instincts were correct, and her hair in episode 9 was styled in the same manner as mine from episode 18. That was also the episode where my family and friends took pictures of their televisions and sent them to me standing next to Ross and Rachel as Ross drums up some cockamamie story about their wedding proposal that he tells guests of the party. Me being one of them. My phone was ringing off the hook from people I hadn't heard from in years to see if that was me. I still get private messages and texts to this day from people saying they saw me on Friends reruns. And speaking of Brad Pitt, that leads me to another project that I worked on, and I actually did get cast exclusively because of my hair. In fact, I want to say there were about 6 of us strictly cast because of our hair, as featured extras that day on this project that involved Brad Pitt. It was a period piece reimagined, if you will, and it was called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I thought the movie was brilliant, and not because my hair was in it. I've always been intrigued by true crime storylines, but to have one written and directed by the legendary Quentin Tarantino, giving us that fairy tale ending on the Manson murders and what would happen to Sharon Tate, that's why it was brill. I don't know that I've ever been on set with a movie director who had had that much energy. Not as much as this guy. His vibe was magnetic and contagious. You just wanted to be around him. He was the star. He just seemed to be so happy and playful. And I gotta say, it was inspiring. I believe the budget for this movie was somewhere between 90 and 96 million. I wonder how much of that budget went specifically into creating the iconic 60s hair trends. I heard that they pulled a lot of old school hairdressers out of retirement, hoping to trigger that nostalgia, transporting us back to the winding down of this golden age. Hairstyles can definitely catapult you into a precise space and time, and I think it worked. If you want to try to catch my unique stylings, I'm in 2 scenes wedged together by narration. The first one includes Al Pacino playing Marvin Schwartz. Not Schwartz, but Schwartz. While he's on a phone call in a restaurant some of you may recognize from other classic movie scenes. This popular venue is called the Cicada Club. It's this stunning Art Deco restaurant located in downtown LA. Though it's been more than 30 years since Pretty Woman was released, I recognized this room the moment I walked in. You remember that scene where Julia Roberts, otherwise known as Vivian, my name is Vivian, her escargot launched from her plate, and that eagle-eyed waiter stood on high alert, poised like a culinary ninja, ready to intercept those slippery little suckers. And in mid-flight, that was the restaurant. And that's where we did this scene. Sorry, I get carried away sometimes. But if anybody's interested, my right profile updo is directly behind Al Pacino during that phone call. Then, right after the stock movie poster of Nebraska Jim, my hair made a 1-second appearance in an outdoor Roman eatery as Rick Dalton, otherwise known as Leonardo DiCaprio, with Daphne Ben-Kobo, is that how they said it? Rick's co-star, otherwise known as Tarantino's then girlfriend, now wife, makes an entrance while paparazzi's cameras are flashing. Now, make sure you don't blink, or you will not see me. You for sure will not be able to make out that it's me, which is why I'm telling you where I am. I'm just glad to know my hair added a bit of ambiance to this cinematic ode to 1960s Hollywood. But it's not always about work. Sometimes your hair can help you make friends and also help you discern who might not be looking out for your best interest. Only theirs. Let me explain by telling you a story that takes us back to a time before Hollywood. For me, anyway. As some of you know, because I mentioned it before, I lived in Nashville, Tennessee before I moved to California. I had worked at this New York-style deli called Nashville, and it was a hub for the country music entertainment industry. I made a lot of friends and contacts there. One of the many that I had met was an up-and-coming artist who asked me out. And we went out on a few dates, and I liked him, but something was a bit off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. His name was Jason Sellers, and he had had a few songs on the country charts at the time. I remember him for a song entitled I'm Your Man, and that he was the ex-husband of the I Hope You Dance songstress Leanne Womack. But I remember him more for the story that I'm about to tell you. I mean, he was charming, he was funny, he was pretty cute. But one of the things he did, or let me rephrase that, one of the things he didn't do was he would never call me by my name. He always addressed me as Skirt. And at first I just thought it was kind of cheeky. But then it kind of started to bother me a little bit. Well, there's a reason for that. Another person that I met at Nashville was this really hot chick that worked across the street at a very popular Nashville hair salon called Salon FX. She would come in for lunch to grab a to-go order on occasion. This chick had fantastic hair, and she was beautiful. I always say if someone does hair and their hair looks good, they probably know what they're doing. So I got her number, and Leah became my hairdresser. So I go in for my hair appointment, and you know how sometimes your hairdresser kind of becomes everyone's therapist? Well, it's kind of like that. But she and I really did hit it off, and we're both spilling the tea on what's happening in our lives, and I'm telling her this story about this guy. I hadn't told her his name, but we started comparing notes. And I say to Leah, but I can't get past the fact that he never calls me by my name. He always addresses me as Skirt. She stopped cutting my hair, jaw dropped to the floor, and she looked at me with both hands on her hips and asked, "Is his name Jason?" And I asked, "Jason Sellers? Why?" And she said, I think I know why he calls both of us Skirt." We both started laughing because we were like, that motherfucker didn't want to get the names of the multiple chicks he was dating mixed up, so he called us all by the same nickname. It's kind of smart if you think about it, but it's also a small world. And he had to know we worked across the street from one another. Nashville wasn't as big as it is now, back then. Anyway, Leah and I concocted a plan. Jason would be playing an upcoming In the Round show at the Bluebird Cafe. And if you don't know what the Bluebird is, it's this legendary shoebox of a club where all of the greats have played. You may have seen it on the show Nashville, starring Connie Bryton and Hayden Panettiere. But anyway, he had a show coming up there. Leah and I got tickets and decided to surprise him by showing up and sitting together in the front row. It was hilarious and extremely fulfilling. He could barely sing because he was trying not to laugh throughout the entirety of his show because he got caught. Needless to say, neither one of us dated him again, but Leah and I became the best of friends. We were inseparable for the remainder of the time I lived in Nashville, and she was the one I would take on my first trip to Los Angeles some 28 years ago. Who knew that I would have ended up moving here? We still keep in touch, but what a memory that was. I could go on all day with stories and the drama related to my hair. Even an entire season of a show that I worked on revolved around the drama of hair. But that will be its own episode at some point. So today, I leave you with one of my favorite lines from the movie Steel Magnolias, when Annelle pledges with this line, "Miss Truvy, I swear to you that my personal tragedy will not interfere with my ability to do good hair." And in my case, it was to give good hair. I want to give a big shout out to my Indiana girls, in particular, my Logansport High School cheerleading squad, for teaching me how to manage this mop. We may not have been the best squad in the world, but damn, we gave some good hair. I wish you all a good hair day this week, as you can never have too many of these. I'm Candi Rans, and this is the Proxy Principle.
The Proxy Principle.
Introducing Vanity Fair, the band that brings unforgettable performances covering more than 25 music genres from the 1920s to today. With a growing set list and a range of ensembles, they're perfect for corporate events, festivals, weddings, and more. When you want entertainment that stands out, Vanity Fair delivers every time. Their team is dedicated to working with you, offering personalized experiences that match your vision and your budget, and creating a truly memorable event. Ready to book Vanity Fair for your next event? Visit vanityfair-theband.com.